Okay. And one, we're live. Yes. Yes, we are live. Sorry. Hello and welcome to Grad Chat by PhD Balance, where we talk about topics of grad school beyond the academic research and that may be a little bit more difficult to talk about in our day to day. I'm your host, Linda Corcoran, and I'm currently a research master's student at University College Cork in Ireland. Obligatory, if you like what you see here, make sure to check out the PhD Balance YouTube channel for more grad chats, and don't forget to subscribe for notifications about when we go live. Our topic today is navigating post-PhD unknowns, and I'm super excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Stephanie Deppe. Thank you so much for being here. So Stephanie, after completing her PhD in physics from the University of Michigan in 2019, decided to pursue a career in science communication. And even though she had a lot of varied experience from during her PhD, she still had a lot of career uncertainty going into post-PhD life. And to complicate things, the world went into a pandemic, and Stephanie was also suffering from extreme burnout at the time. So she can probably speak a little bit more about that. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, thanks. I'm so excited to be here. I love grad chat, so it's an honor to be here. So I guess to set the scene a little bit, I defended my PhD in physics at the University of Michigan in April of 2019. And like a smart PhD student, I immediately jumped right into the next thing, which do not recommend. I highly recommend taking a break after your PhD. You've just put in a ton of work to prepare this potentially hundreds of pages document that is your dissertation, and did this big presentation for your committee, and highly recommend taking some time off between your next thing. I did not do that. So I immediately jumped into teaching a class that was based on astronomy. And it's my favorite class I've ever taught, but it happened right after my PhD. And then I jumped right into being a AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, where I was essentially a science journalist for a summer. And so I didn't have anything lined up after my Mass Media Fellowship. And that was partially due to the fact that I could not muster up the energy to apply for more jobs, mostly due to the burnout that I was experiencing. And so I came home from that fellowship, and basically I distinctly remember just not getting out of bed for 2 weeks. So I was suffering with some pretty intense burnout. Also faced with the fact that I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I went into this mass media fellowship thinking that, oh yeah, science journalism sounds great. I have a lot of science writing experience. I love writing about science. I could definitely see myself becoming a science writer. And then I did that fellowship and I was like, oh no, never mind. Like, I don't, I don't want to be a journalist.
Good you found out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, the mass media fellowship was actually like the perfect experience for that, because it's a very short, like defined thing. It's 3 months long and then you're done. And so it was great. I did enjoy it, but I was like, oh, I don't want to do this for like my whole career. And so I came out of that and I was like, oh no, I don't know what I want to do. I don't have anything lined up. I now if unemployed. And so that was a pretty big period of uncertainty for me. And that, yeah, that continued for a little bit, for sure. And then, yeah,
Absolutely. Uncertainty can be hard to deal with at any point in time, but definitely when you're going through so much, well, burnout anyway, and you're going through so much of dealing with leaving academia, dealing with the job market, dealing with applications, dealing with everything that goes along with that, and also pandemic starting. That's another level of uncertainty. Like what was it like dealing with all that?
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very difficult. So another piece of the context here is when I basically moved out of my parents for undergrad, I didn't move back because every summer when I was in undergrad, I basically had some sort of research experience lined up where I was not living at home. And so I had not lived at home with my parents for like 10 years. And so then having to move back home, which like I'm so grateful that that was an option for me, but it was more of like this mental thing of like, oh, like I can't provide for myself. It was like a really strong feeling of failure, pretty much, that like I had spent, you know, almost 10 years building up my scientific research skills. I really went all into science communication while I was in grad school. I'd spent a lot of time building up those skills. And then to have to move back home because I'm unemployed was like a really big, I don't want to call it an ego check, but like it was a real punch in the gut. Like, and I had to grapple with those feelings for a long time, like accepting help from other people. I'm a very independent person. I don't like relying on other people for like my needs or like my, you know, for food or shelter or like whatever. I am very independent in that way. And so I had to like accept that I needed this help at this time in my life. And so that was another thing that I was dealing with. And then add on to that, like applying for jobs is, it can be pretty much a full-time job, especially I think in science communication, there are a lot of jobs. I was surprised at the number of jobs that were open, but there's also a lot of people who are applying for those jobs. Like it's a pretty tough market, I would say. And so I honestly lost track of the number of jobs I applied for. And just going through that season of my life, I think was really important for me to learn to rely on other people when I need help. And I mean, honestly, that's really what got me through that.
You honestly said so many things there that we could start to touch on. I think the first one is moving back in with your parents. Obviously depends on the relationship you have with your parents, but
Yes.
even then it can be so difficult, especially when you've been on your own for an extended period of time, because now you've established all your own ways and your life, and suddenly you have to go back to your parents' ways nearly and what you were like as a teenager, because in their minds you haven't moved on from there.
Yes.
And that can be really difficult even without dealing with everything else. But I guess to preface all of this science communication work, do you want to maybe tell us a bit about where you got into that in grad school and why you decided to pursue a career in it?
Yeah. So my sort of, I guess I call it my kickstart into science communication, because that's really what it was. So in graduate school, my research project was discovering and studying new objects in the Kuiper Belt region of the solar system, which is like a icy asteroid belt type structure that's out beyond Neptune in our solar system. So I was using a big telescope down in Chile to look for and study these objects. And one of the objects we found was a new dwarf planet candidate that we measured the size of it, and it's about the size of the state of Oregon, which is, you know, reasonably sized for these types of objects. And so that got some press attention. Our university put out a press release, and that got picked up by a few places. I got a couple of speaking opportunities from that. And those were really my first like real public talks, like talking about my research. And I did those and I was like, oh, I love this. I love this more than I love doing the research. And so that was, I call it my kickstart, because it was like, I call it, before that project and then after that project was like the 2 seasons of my graduate school life. And so after that, I went all in. Like, I started looking for any and all opportunities I could at the University of Michigan to like start getting involved with science communication. That was like when I learned that science communication was a field and that people actually get paid to do this for a living. I didn't know that before, which I think is a pretty common experience. I think as early researchers, at least my experience was, I always thought that outreach was something that people did in their free time.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
absolutely.
Yeah, like I didn't know that you could do that and get paid for it.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we, for the most part, only think of science as the person doing it in the lab and not the communicating of it. And even though people can do both, but mostly obviously they'll be in the lab or doing their research or whatever they're doing, there are people out there doing full-time science communication. And I think a lot of people don't learn that until they're actually in grad school.
Yeah, and I hope that's changing. I hope that I don't know, maybe it's because I'm really in it now, but I hope that there is more visibility that is a viable career path, and a totally valid career path. And so, yeah, I mean, I learned about halfway through my graduate career that was something that I could get paid to do. And so then I just like, I'm pretty sure I spent more time on science communication than on my research in the second half of grad school. And so I pretty much did everything from writing to speaking to training other researchers to communicate their science more effectively, and like everything in between. I organized conferences about science communication, and it just like went all in on everything pretty much, which leads me to my burnout. So that I don't regret anything that I got involved in, because that gave me the skill set and the strengths that I have now that will absolutely be applicable in my current job at Rubin Observatory. But I would be lying if I told you that it didn't contribute to my burnout. I think I ended up getting involved in too many things and to too much depth. And by the time I finished up my graduate career, my body just decided that I was done.
Wow. Yeah, that can be, I definitely resonate with the getting involved in too many things and loving them all and not wanting to step back and loving that you're getting the experience, but also being like, I'm going to go sleep for a week, a month now, because it's all over. And unfortunately, in academia, in grad school, outside of academia too many people push themselves to the point of burnout all of the time. So I guess you did say that you slept for a long time when you got back to your parents, but how did you deal with I guess recognizing burnout but also recovering from it?
Yeah, so my burnout really manifested in my tendency to procrastinate things. So I started pushing things off more and more and more, waiting more and more until the last minute to do it. And then, I mean, of course, it was not as good of a product as it could have been. I'm pretty sure I did not get one of the jobs I applied for exactly that reason, which was like, that was, I think, my reality check where I was like, oh, I've overextended myself. And so learning to recognize those signs where like, you know that you love these things that you're doing, but you don't want to do them, was, at least for me, one of the warning signs that I ignored for a long time. And then, yeah, that one was, I think, the big one for me, where I was procrastinating the things that I loved doing and not just the things that I didn't love doing. And then recovering, like, if your body says, I don't want to do this, like, listen to it. Don't, like, take a break, step back, and just listen to what your body and your mind are telling you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super important to take care of yourself. And even though we all love being involved in a million things, there's no point in going into burnout, and it's better to try and learn what your signs are before you get there. But
Yes.
I guess going through that, and also having the pressure of trying to get a job and everything like that, it nearly fuels you that you don't want to get help, because you end up in this cycle of feelings and trying to avoid them as well. And very much of, I guess, one question we got a lot of on social media was, how do you deal with these feelings of, I guess, nearly inadequacy when you are trying to find a job and you're not finding them, and you're doing all of these applications and you don't know where your life is going?
Oh yeah. Yes. That is so hard. Like, I just want to say first and foremost that, like, I was there, like 100% I felt that, because I had spent all this time in grad school, building up these skills in science communication. And then, excuse me, I would find these jobs where I was like, I check off all the boxes. I like, there's no way they won't hire me. But oftentimes it's not you. Like, there are a lot of people who have those qualifications, and really, like, reminding myself after every rejection, after every like non-interview, like, whenever I didn't move on to the next stage, realizing that it's not me. Like, this is not a reflection of my worth or my skills. It's just someone else was a better fit, and that's okay. And it's not that I am bad at what I do or that I'm not good enough. It's just I wasn't quite the right fit for that job, and that's okay. And so I constantly reminding myself of that was a big thing, because I think a lot of people that make it to the PhD stage, or that continue on to graduate school, maybe aren't so used to failing. That's not something that we're really used to. And so I think the whole job search process was the first, like, real time where I was like, I had to face that. And so, as hard as it is, getting comfortable with rejection was the biggest thing that helped me, and internalizing that it's not a reflection of my self-worth as a person. I'm still a good person. I'm still loved by my friends and family. I'm still, like, I still have all these skills. They can't take that from me or anything. It's just someone else was maybe a little bit of a better fit. And so, like, after every application, every rejection, I would just, like, okay, I'm still a good person. I'm still good at what I do. I will find something.
That can still be so hard. And I know, I guess rejection is part of academia as well. Rejection is part of job applications. Rejection is part of everything. And it still is so ridiculously hard to deal with. And it's so ridiculously hard to keep reminding yourself that your adequacy and your worth as a person are not tied to your achievements. And that can especially be a problem for high achieving people that go into graduate school and they go get higher degrees, and whatever they decide to do afterwards, it can be so difficult to get your mind out of that, because unfortunately it's the culture that is there. And it's the culture that most of us were that was drummed into us from childhood.
Yes.
Some of us
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. And, honestly, looking back, it was horrible when I was going through it. It was very hard, but I'm honestly grateful that that happened, because I'm a lot more comfortable with rejection now. So I am the kind of person where I really try to see the positives in everything. And it's hard in the moment, but looking back now, I'm like, I needed to go through that to grow as a person and to reach the position I'm at now.
Absolutely, but it still doesn't make it easier at the
Oh, it's
time.
hard. It's so
Yeah.
hard. And if you don't have to go through that, I would if I was like some magical fairy or something that could, like the job awarding fairy or I don't know. But if I could somehow keep people from going through that, I would. But I am grateful that it happened, because now I am where I am.
I think it's the same as anything when it comes to any poor mental health struggles, mental illness, burnout, the lot of it. Everyone is like, it's been great for developing me as a person, but I would not wish it on anyone. I would not wish it on the worst person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one thing that I guess can affect your mental health is dealing with the upcoming looming uncertainty when you are still in grad school. And we definitely got questions about that, because you have all this pressure trying to finish, trying to get your dissertation and thesis in, and trying to prepare for your defense, but you still have this looming uncertainty of what the hell am I going to do next? And can you speak a little bit about your experience with that, or what happened?
Yeah. So my last year of grad school, I did apply for a couple of postdoc positions, but I was pretty sure at that point that I didn't want to continue with my scientific research. And so I started looking for more science communication based jobs and applying for those. And as I was nearing the end of my graduate career, my burnout was starting to make itself apparent. I was struggling a lot. And so I was really fortunate to have a really supportive and understanding advisor who basically I was able to tell him that I was struggling, which I fully recognize that is not a position that a lot of people are in. I was very fortunate to have an advisor who was supportive like that. And so he became one of the people that I could hey, if you see a posting, pass it my way, or tapping into your network to just learn what's out there was one thing that really helped me. When I started looking for jobs, I was like, I don't even know what I'm looking for. I don't know what to even search for something in science communication. And if anyone else is in that position right now, I am very happy to pass along what I learned along the way. But that looming uncertainty definitely did not help in finishing up my PhD. And I remember I applied for this AAAS Mass Media Fellowship, and I told my advisor that I got it, and he I think had a happier reaction than I did, because he was just he had seen over the last few months how much I was just struggling to find something, whereas the rest of my group members were getting postdoc offers and learning what they wanted to do. And I had talked to him and being I'm really struggling seeing the rest of our group find their next thing, and here I am still struggling to figure it out. And so when I told him that I had landed something for the summer, he was more excited than I was, which was great. But having that support network, people you can talk to about the fact that you're struggling, really helped me.
It's fantastic that you have a supportive, or you had a supportive advisor.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We always like to see it, no matter who it's for. But I think one thing that can be so daunting, even like more than the, well, not more than the uncertainty, but as well as the uncertainty, is just trying to prepare yourself for life outside of academia, for a career outside of academia, when for so long you had been, I guess, hurtling towards there, even if you hadn't 100% at the start of your PhD been like, I want to stay in academia, you were kind of slightly heading in that direction anyway, or unconsciously, because at the start of a PhD, pretty much everyone assumes that they're going, or all of the advisors assume you're going somewhere along that lines. But it's becoming more uncommon, thankfully, to see people talking about leaving academia, to see all of the different careers that you can go get into, and see universities starting to inform people about that. But like, what, I guess, was it like to try and figure out how to write your skills and write your experience in a non-academic way?
Yeah. So that, yes, that's definitely another part of it. Luckily, there are a lot of resources like blog posts and these kinds of things that can help you for basically translating your academic CV, which is more like chronological, whatever, we know what a CV is, into a more like skills-based, results-focused resume. So there are a lot of people who have written great blog posts about how to do that. And I read tons of those types of articles. For my current job, the resume I submitted, I actually had attended a dedicated resume like workshop webinar thing. And the person who ran that, at the very end, like I was so glad I stayed to the very end of that webinar. It was like, hey, if you want me to look at your resume and give you feedback, like I can do that. And there are people you can hire and like contract to critique your resume. And so I was like, oh, I didn't know that was something that I could do. So like reach out to the career center at your school. I think most schools probably have a career center and someone who is available to do that and workshop your resume with you. And so I paid someone to look at my to look at my resume and make it better, and it was a lot better afterwards. I was like, dang, I should have done this way sooner. So if there's one piece of advice I can give you, it is start with that. Like take your best first crack at writing a resume, and then like have someone who's like, that is their job to do that, is one of the services they provide, to look at your resume and help you make it better. But
That's great. That you were able, or I guess in the right place in the right time to stay there to find that out. Because unfortunately, a lot of things, especially as you're transitioning, whether it's even just disciplines or industries or whatever it is, it can be so difficult to get into what everyone else considers to be the norm, whether that is just the layout of your CV or resume, or the language that's used, or how you highlight the skills. All that sort of thing can vary. And one thing I found out about recently, which I never knew before, was informational interviews, where you just ring up a person or email them and be like, I'm considering going into a position like yours. Can I have 30 minutes of your time just to ask you about it?
Yep. I tell everyone who tells me that they are looking for a job, oh, start your informational interviews now. So yes, I did quite a lot of those. I wouldn't say that for me personally, none of them actually led to a position, but a lot of people find jobs that way. Just, sort of going through a network. And one thing I always tell people, when you're doing an informational interview, the last question you should always ask is, who else should I talk to? Because that's how you keep it going. You don't have to like search out the next person. You have their name and contact information from the last person you talked to, and that's how you keep it going. But yeah, I mean, just reaching out to people, and you'd be amazed, I think, at just, telling people that you're on the job market, how far that will take you. Because then people will know, like, maybe you'll be the person then that they think of when they come across a job posting. And then they'll send it your way, and you might find a job that you didn't know about had they not sent it to you.
Yeah, people are great. Even just like, I always say Twitter is my best networking, because people that you just met once, or that you had a conversation with, or that saw a tweet, were like, I saw you were looking for something. I've seen this. You should apply for this.
Yes.
Like, it's great.
Yeah, I relied heavily on Twitter during my unemployment to find positions. There's a lot of people, especially in science communication, post their positions on Twitter. And so that's how I found out about pretty much everything I applied for. And then also, like, Twitter's a great networking platform also. Like, if there's someone you sort of look up to, or has a position that you're really interested in, like, you can send them a DM on Twitter, be like, hey, can I have just 20 minutes of your time just to chat about what you do? I'm super interested. And most of the time, people, in my experience, are super responsive and like totally willing to talk to you. It's like the person you're DMing, if you like, I totally get being nervous to just like reach out to somebody out of the blue, just a cold email or a random Twitter DM. But in my experience, people are like totally willing to talk about what they do, because a lot of the time they're really excited about what they do. And so, yeah, if that's what's stopping you from reaching out to people, please don't let that stop you. We're all really friendly people.
I love that so much, because I know myself, like, even emailing someone that I've met once, I'm still like, I am so sorry for bothering you.
Yes.
And they're generally, like, 99% of the time, they're like, you want to hear about my job, my science? Let me talk to you for 10 years.
I know, in most of my experience, we like go over the time I had allotted. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to take up any more of your time. And everybody's like, oh no, it's no problem at all. So don't be afraid of that. If you're afraid of bothering people or wasting their time, don't be afraid of that.
That's just great. And it's very much, I think we had one question that was definitely kind of like, how do you, I guess, form this network, also maybe just outside of Twitter or outside of these different things? I know you said you had experience, but getting a non-academic network is very different from an academic network.
Yeah. I mean, again, I know I struggle a little bit with this one, because in terms of like networking things, I consider myself to be relatively extroverted. Like, I have no problem responding to someone's tweet who I haven't talked to before, like sort of making those connections that way. And unfortunately, with the pandemic and everything, in-person conferences aren't really a thing. And that's also where I built up my network. But like, I would recommend, I think, finding a couple people that you would love to connect with. Like, think about what you might want to do in the future, and maybe figure out who is sort of active in that space. Don't try to like reach out to everybody at once. Pick out, 2 or 3 people that you would be interested in talking to. Send me an email. I can be that first person for you. Like, 100%. I would be so happy to talk to you, and then forward you on to other people. And then that's sort of how it gets started, is you find a couple people, and then always ask that question, who else should I talk to? And then I think you'll find that it will sort of naturally start progressing from there.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really great advice. Well, personally, I'm the opposite to you. Even though I'm getting better, I'm very, very bad at networking with people, and I find it easier to network virtually than I do in person. So I have a great network of virtual people, but if I went to an in-person conference, I'd be like the person hiding in the corner.
Yeah.
That it's hard.
Yes.
But I guess one thing that is slightly linked to that, which is just people thinking that feeling that imposter syndrome again when they're going to try to move into a new industry or a new career, and then trying to also even just network, but also apply for jobs. And just even thinking about it, they're like, I'm not. I'm the imposter again, which we always talk about in academia and research, but can really follow you if you don't deal with it. Did you kind of have experience with that, or how do you deal with
Yes.
it?
Yes, I have written blog posts about imposter syndrome because I feel it so strongly. um, so there are a couple of things I'll say that I think have helped me sort of try to shift my mindset around imposter syndrome. The first one, specifically when applying for jobs. So all jobs come with like this checklist of things that they're looking for in a candidate. And I don't remember the exact statistic, but like the idea sort of sticks in my mind, where men or men identifying individuals tend to apply for jobs that they only hit like maybe 30 or 40% of those check boxes, whereas women tend to not apply unless they hit like 90% or something. I don't know if those numbers are exactly right, but it's like that statistic has always stuck in my head, where I'm like, oh, I only hit like 60% of the boxes. Well, a man would apply for that. And so like recognizing that you don't have to hit all of those check boxes was really big for me in sort of overcoming that, I guess, anxiety surrounding applying for jobs. You don't have to hit all of the check boxes, and the potential employer is not expecting you to, and a lot of them you can learn on the job. And so my rule of thumb was like, okay, if I hit 50%, I'm going to apply. That was just my rule. I was like, okay, if this is a job that sounds interesting and I hit 50% of the requirements, I'm going to apply for that job. And then whatever happens, happens. Because the only way you're not going to get the job is if you don't apply.
Absolutely. I think this happened a couple of years ago, but someone who was working in recruitment once told me, they were like, if we have a really, really good bunch of applications, we will still interview people that meet 2/3 of our requirements. But if we don't have a good bunch of applications, we will interview people with less. And then I was like, that kind of just hit me as this has been a scam. I have been looking at these job applications like I need to.
Yes. 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 If you don't hit all the check boxes, it's okay. If it's something that you are excited about, apply anyway. A lot of the stuff that they require for the job, you can learn on the job.
And like, even if you have 100% of these requirements, you're still going to need on-job learning anyway, because every job works different. But the fact of the matter is, very, very, very few people will actually have even 90% or 80% of the requirements.
Yes.
So apply.
Yes, apply for the job. Yeah, and then the other piece of imposter syndrome imposter syndrome is feeling, well, like you're an imposter, that everyone else is smarter than you. And I had a realization like right before I started my current job. I started at Rubin Observatory back in January, and I, like the week leading up to my start date, I was like, I'm going to fail it. Like, oh my God, I am not ready. I don't know how to do it. Like, I just had this moment of like kind of panic almost. And then I saw something, or I had this realization. I was like, if I'm having this massive of imposter syndrome before a job that I am so excited about, like, I think that is a good thing. Like, that means I'm going to learn so much on this job. I'm going to be surrounded by people who know a lot more than I do about this kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, what a learning opportunity. And so I really tried to make that mental shift of like imposter syndrome. It can be a really hard thing to navigate, but if you're having imposter syndrome going into a new thing, I think that I've tried to frame it in my head of like, you're probably on the right path then, because that means you're probably going to learn a lot. And so that was something that helped me. I had like major imposter syndrome like in the week before starting my job, and it's turned out to be awesome, and I'm so excited.
That's great. Obviously not having the imposter syndrome is great, but changing or trying to change your mentality, even though it can be such a hard switch, is a fantastic thing to do. And it's great that you love your job now, because that's what we all want. But I guess we've touched on a lot of topics today, but we're kind of running out of time. So before we end, is there anything you'd like to touch on that we haven't touched on already?
I don't know necessarily, but if you are struggling with the unknowns right now, like, that's totally valid. And I see you. And there are a lot of people who are also going through that. Not that that makes it any easier, but just lean on your support network. And I promise that there is an other side to the uncertainty. My uncertainty went on for almost 2 years, well, more like 1.5 years. And there is an end. It won't last forever, and you will make it through.
That's an amazing thought. And thank you so much for being an amazing guest and for sharing all your wisdom with all of our viewers and whoever is listening or watching later on. So this has been Grad Chat by PhD Balance. We go live every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. And if you like what you see here, make sure to go to our YouTube channel for more Grad Chats. And you can also listen via our podcast hosted on Anchor FM, which the episodes go on Tuesday after the live stream. So thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you learned stuff. Bye.
Bye, all.